25. First Fight. The next morning found Kip sitting with Knox at the broken table, suspiciously eyeing Maven. The older couple had taken the arrival of the young child with seamless grace. "Would you like something to drink, little one?" Maven crouched level with the girl. Kip turned her face into Knox's chest. Knox answered for her. "I bet you'd love some milk. What do you say?" He nudged the girl's cheek. Kip tipped her small, round face up to his and gave a slight nod. Maven had a thick-rimmed glass full of milk before her a moment later. Kip eagerly reached out and pulled the cup to her lips. "Poor thing, she looks half-starved. Have you not been feeding her?" Knox grimaced. "We've been trying, but from what we could gather, she was with her father for quite some time before I got to them." Gord, who had sat quietly through Knox relating his time in Beryl and finding Kip, growled, "They deprived a child? Who could justify such a thing?" Knox hazarded a glance down at Kip, who seemed to be ignoring their conversation, intent on emptying her cup. "The commander I ran into was not one for remorse. Their army is going to march, and it is going to take everything we have to hold them at bay." Gord's normally warm and open features darkened. "We will protect ours." "Yes, we will," Maven agreed. "And we will need every bit of strength we can get to do so." She glanced meaningfully down at Kip and back to Knox. Knox's chest tightened, catching her meaning, and he frowned. "She's not of my blood," he defended. "Are you willing to give up your strength again? The Order is not going to let you become an adoptive father any more than they would a biological one." "I'll cross that bridge when we come to it." "Why wait?" Maven pressed. "We can find the child a good family here in the cluster who—" "No!" The sharp word cut into the room, and Kip flinched against him. He lowered his voice. "She's my responsibility." Maven moved back to the stove, picking up her spoon to stir the soup. "You've only just got your strength back. The cluster needs you to—" "They have me." Knox's jaw flexed as he cut her off. "I'll do all that I can to protect Rickon, but I will not give her up. Is that understood?" She regarded him for a moment, but then nodded. "Of course, it's your choice. I only highlight what the Order will require. She will either have to be sworn in as an acolyte with you as her patron, or you will be required to lay down your oaths again." With sudden clarity, he recognized something fundamental had shifted within him. If he were asked when it had begun, he couldn't have said. But the slow transformation manifested in the small child who sat contentedly on his lap. The Order no longer held his primary loyalty. He laid down his oaths between them. Despite the return of his strength, loyalty to the Order did not press into him. He looked back to Maven with confidence. "I will not willingly lay down my strength again. If the sky herself takes it from me, so be it, but I will not bow to the Order on this." Maven raised an eyebrow in surprise, but said nothing. Gord pushed away from the table. "Sounds perfectly sensible to me. Wait here, I'll be right back." He trundled up the staircase, and Knox heard him rustling around in one of the upstairs bedrooms. By the confused expression on Maven's face, it looked like she didn't have any more of an idea than he as to what Gord was up to. He returned a few minutes later with a small gray stuffed animal hanging loosely in his hand. Kip lifted her head and watched Gord's approach with interest. He held out the toy rabbit toward Kip, but looked at Knox. "If she is yours, she is ours." His eyes flipped back to Kip, whose hands reached out for the animal. "She's been well loved, but if you want it, it's yours, sweetheart." A small smile pulled at Kip's lips, and she squished the rabbit to her chest. Gord's large hand gripped Knox's shoulder in a reassuring gesture. "I mean it. We will never expect you to give up anything else in the name of the Order. I don't care what anyone says." Maven's face relaxed into a full smile, her earlier uncertainty gone, and she moved to Gord's side with a nod. He wrapped a thick arm around her waist, pulling her close. Knox's throat went thick with emotion, and all he could manage was a small nod. "Right," Gord said, clearing the air with his booming baritone. "What do I need to start fabricating? Weapons?" Knox rubbed his jaw and chuckled, thankful for the shift. "My guess is the main force will bypass the outlying clusters. The commander seemed intent on challenging the Order directly, which means she'll make for the capital. What we need to be prepared for is the beasts." He thought for a moment and added, "Although weapons are not a bad idea, raiding parties may follow." Worry lines crumpled Gord's features. "How many creatures do they have?" "We saw a pod of Deckham on the road, and of course the Brecker, but the residents of Beryl saw many more. The Tumultians are pushing the creatures inland from the tumult itself." "How is such a thing even possible?" "Nearest we could guess is tech on their hovercraft. It emits some sort of pulse into the ground to drive the creatures before them. Emilia would probably have an idea. She may even be able to reverse engineer it." Maven's face lit. "She was drawing plans for something similar before she left. I don't know if she finished them." The plans she started that morning. His Emilia would have continued to search for a solution. With a pang of sadness, he had to acknowledge what pushed Emilia from Rickon. She had gone in search of a different solution. If only she knew how futile her battle in the capital was, and how pressing the battle here would be. Could I have gotten here in time to stop her? Even as he thought it, Kip shifted on him and let out a small sigh of contentment as she leaned back and examined her new toy. His hand brushed her curls, and the stab of regret eased. They each were on their own path. "Do you have the schematics? Maybe we can piece together what she started." Maven was ahead of him, moving to the large desk in the corner of the living room and rustling through papers. "She was thinking of creating some sort of perimeter fence. I think she was worried it wouldn't be enough against the large beast you faced, though. Our only true defense against that creature is the roots of the mountain itself, but the others may be deterred by something like that. It would be a hard sell to get people to retreat into the mountains with winter on its way. If we can create a space here safe from the beasts, it could give us time to prepare if we need to take further steps," Maven said. Gord pulled the schematic closer. "I actually already started with these. I have a limited fence already around the property, but they drain a considerable amount of power. I don't know how you'd be able to produce the energy needed to protect a much larger space." "The engineers in Beryl were stumped by the same thing. Give us as much space as you can, and the cluster will have to make do," Knox said. He looked down at Kip, who was absently rubbing one of the rabbit's soft ears against her chin. "I need to go and see Dedan. He may have some insight on the capital and a way to get in touch with Terran. They need to know what's coming." "Kip, would you like to stay here with Gord and me?" Maven asked. "I think I have some quat fruit we could finish up." Kip shook her head and frowned, looking up at Knox. He gave her a reassuring smile. "You are safe here, and I will be back before long." She chewed the inside of her cheek. "You could come help me in the shop," Gord offered. Her eyes brightened, and she looked to Knox. He smiled and nodded, and she hopped down. A low chuckle rumbled from Gord's chest. The shop always wins them over." "Any luck with communications?" Knox asked. With Rook being compromised, messages to the capital were out, but Dedan had hoped communication with nearby clusters could be re-established. The large man looked up from behind a stack of metal boxes, disemboweled wires cascading around him. "Nothing yet." Dedan puffed his cheeks, making his round face even rounder. "Someone is jamming our cluster. That's the only thing that makes any sense." "Can that be done?" "It can, but it's limited in range. Whoever is doing this is close." A shiver of knowing spilled over Knox, and he froze. The Tumultians are here. Dayton's jowled face blanched. I thought you said the raiders were days away. I was wrong. They've been here for weeks. Knox spun and ran from Rickon's communication room and into the concourse of the council hall. Dayton scrambled after him. A tremor coursed through the building, and the two men slid to a stop. Not now, Knox breathed. We need more time. Another rumble shook the ground, and shouts and screams sounded through the building. Go, tell the council. It's not only the beasts, the Tumultians are here. They need to get the people to higher ground, or at least behind Gord's fence. Dayton's eyes widened, but he bobbed his head in understanding. Where are you going? To intercept the raiders! Knox sprinted from the building as the ground shook again. People ran for stilted walkways and the supposed safety of their homes. If he was right, it wouldn't be enough. He pushed skyward with a jump. Landing on a nearby rooftop, his boots slipped and he scrambled up the cedar shakes to look past the cluster to the lower field. His heart stuttered at the sight. The ground in the field swirled and foamed. Depths. The cascading and rolling earth could only mean another brecca. His stomach twisted in memory as the beast broke free of the churning dirt and crested. Its black body glinted in the afternoon light as its great triangle head tipped to the sky. This one was smaller than the one that had taken Logan and him, a building-sized behemoth rather than the moving mountain they'd faced before. Has it only been a couple of weeks? It felt like a lifetime since he'd first witnessed the terrible creatures. A shiver tingled down his spine, and in answer, fresh power coursed through his veins, flushing the sense of dread. He almost believed the lie of the adrenaline, whispering of his invincibility. But he knew better. Before this creature, none of it mattered. The brecca neared the edge of the cluster, submerging its head with a great splash of dark soil, and turned. It isn't attacking? The wide body curved, showing off its thickly plated skin as it veered away from the cluster. Heavy scales covered every bit of exposed flesh. Except those. The dark, oily patches of the sensory receptors caught Knox's eye. They ran like tracks laterally down the creature's side and shone iridescent under the clear sky. As its head re-emerged, Knox spotted more clustered where the beast's snout should be. Terran had driven the creature off the first time by leveraging the same weakness. Most earthbound creatures lacked eyes and noses, and instead had sensory organs in fleshy whiskers. The brecca lacked any such appendages, but these liquid-looking discs served a similar function. A membrane that would be highly sensitive to electric impulses. His thought was interrupted as a shudder moved through the earth, and the brecca halted its retreat. It thrashed and spun before it could reach the tree line, disturbing a few of the trees at the forest's edge and setting them at odd angles. The brecca writhed and turned, once again rushing toward the cluster with renewed frenzy. Smaller earthbound skittered along in the giant's wake, equally charged. The brecca dove, and the earth closed over its large form, pushing up deep tracks, which solidified even as the peaks crashed together. He cursed as comprehension dawned. This was the Tumultian technology Syracuse had told him about in action. These creatures did not want to move near the deep roots of the forest or rock of the mountain, but the Tumultians were driving them forward anyway, which meant they were close. He scanned the far edge of the lower field and found what he was looking for. A glint of metal reflected the afternoon light. He glanced down at the empty streets, hoping the council would get everyone clear in case he failed. He dropped from the roof and ran toward the forest. The whine of a Tumultian hovercraft cut above the grating sounds of the Earthbound as it edged clear of the forest. How did they drive the creatures here so fast? They had either left before his raid on Barrow, or their craft were much faster than anything seen before. He hoped it was the first, but suspected the second. The Tumultians continued to surprise him with technology that far outstripped the Mercurial's offerings. Keeping to the trees, he ran and pulled the gnarled club from the hook at his belt. Gord had offered to make him something more weapon-like than a clobber root, as he'd called it, but Knox had declined. Instead, Gord added a metal tang up the back, which flared into a cap plate at the root head, and a leather grip, reinforcing the petrified wood. "It needs a proper name," Gord had insisted. "Clobber root is a little undignified." He had chuckled at his own joke. Knox had not had an answer for him. A name would come. He spotted the first of the Tumulcian craft tucked into the shadow of the forest. It was a large transport, open-topped, flat-decked, with a protected pilot pit where the driver sat. Central to each deck was a massive generator emanating with a glow of energy pulsing from probes down into the earth. The sound of shattering timber and exploding stone made him turn. A cloud of dust rose from the edge of the cluster. Knox clenched his jaw. He needed to disable these vehicles before the creatures were driven any deeper into Ricken. He quickly counted the vehicles as he launched himself skyward. 18? Earth be damned. He landed atop the generator of the first craft and had wiped half their souls from the deck before they could do anything more than stand in shock. Apparently, they hadn't been taught to watch the sky. The driver of the craft was the last to go, with the club compressing his spine down toward the floor. 8 raiders down, 136 to go. He grabbed the controls and kicked the vehicle into high gear. I can do this. Another ear-splitting shriek of destruction sounded from the direction of the cluster. He coaxed a bit more speed from the craft, angling its nose toward the belly of its nearest neighbor. No time for finesse. He locked the steering in place and at the last moment jumped toward the trees. The two craft collided and vaporized in a concussive blast. A wave of heat roiled over him, and he cringed as his skin pricked with would-be burns. Knox pulled himself into a thick-limbed pine and waited, watching through the black smoke for signs of movement. The whine of another craft closing in caught his ear before he saw it. Timing his attack by the sound of its approach, he dropped from the tree onto the driver and tossed the man free of the vehicle, redirecting the craft towards the thickest plume of smoke. Once sure the collision was unavoidable, he again threw himself free of the vehicle, absorbing the impact with a roll. Another thunderous boom and more smoke joined the original wreckage. With the initial panic and shock ebbing, the remaining 15 craft maneuvered carefully toward each other, their crews hunkered down and watching the area with narrowed eyes. The nearest craft formed into a defensive ring consisting of 5 vehicles locked together. The crews manned the perimeter, save for a single driver who controlled the whole makeshift platform from his central position. The discipline and order of this army chilled Knox. They absorbed unexpected tactics and loss, immediately adjusting. It spoke to extensive training and preparation, far better than his own people. Hiding in the brush, he waited for one of the large platforms to edge closer to his position. Many of the raiders held the upgraded golden energy bolts he had seen in Beryl. Clearly, they knew they were in the Order's territory and were ready. Knox frowned at the slender weapons, energy coalescing at the tipped end, waiting to be whipped forward, sending a speeding ball of plasma his way. He wasn't eager to take too many of those shots. He dug his hands into the litter on the forest floor. If he could gather a handful of small rocks, he could take out several from a distance. Leaves and decaying wood debris were all his hands could find. Damned earth! His eyes narrowed as he watched the platform. Each still had electrodes submerged, creating manufactured liquefactions, and crackled with uncontained energy. If I can short out the probes, maybe it'll backfeed into the generator. He edged closer. The ground beneath his feet felt like loose sand rather than solid earth. This shouldn't be possible. Had the Tumulcians aligned themselves with the earth as the Mercurial had the sky? He clenched his jaw and pushed himself forward through the slurry. If the earth swallowed him now, he would belong to it. The soil grabbed at his hands and feet, and the brush around him started to sink. He scrambled and eyed the side of the nearest craft. A thrill of alarm pulsed into him, and when the raider standing at the ledge looked away, he flung himself at the platform. He caught hold of a tangle of ropes and wires and stuck to the side like a bug. All it would take was one stray glance, and he'd be at the mercy of their bolts. The ground beneath him bubbled like a boiling pot, no longer bound by natural law. Knox tipped his head back to peer under the craft. 4 probes extended from each of the 5 vehicles. Emilia would have known what each line and wire was for, but the complex web was a mystery to him. He didn't even know if his plan was theoretically sound, but it was the best he had for now. Carefully shifting his handholds, Knox climbed under the craft, hanging from the underbelly like a tree urchin suctioned to a trunk. His eyes traced the various lines, looking for a stretch of pipe long enough for what he had in mind. When he found it, he made sure he was stable and yanked the metal free. The craft's engine stuttered and shifted in tone. He cringed. He didn't want the vehicle to stall and drop on top of him. He held his breath, and thankfully the craft remained in its semi-airborne state, no doubt supported by its other 4 platform mates. The probes crackled around him. His thought had been to find a way to short-circuit the device. Stupid, he internally chided. He had no way to connect them without joining himself into the arc. The craft shuddered and lurched, clearly impacted by his thievery. There was no time for Plan B. He let go of one of his handholds and half hung, giving his arm room to move. He swung the pole through the air a couple of times experimentally before releasing it. The long piece of metal spun toward the probes, and as he hoped, energy grabbed it and leapt down its length, connecting the opposing rods. With a brilliant flash of light and the sound of the sky itself bellowing, Knox was thrown from the craft and enveloped in a white blanket of heat. The very shockwave that threatened to consume him drove him into the soft earth and quelled the flames engulfing him. Instinctively he reached out, even as the dirt closed over his head, catching hold of something rough as the earth around him solidified.